This, rather amusingly called the butt, and then the wing joint on the side. The longest one, this is called the long joint, like that. And then the top, the bell, goes in like that. My case has got a holder for the crook here. The bassoon, so that goes in like that. The reed, onto the bassoon like that. And there we go.
So the first thing that I kind of noticed, it was physically demanding. I don't know why. I imagine it's basically always going, because you're blowing into a little tiny tube.
Yeah.
So I thought, how hard can it be?
Yeah,
but
indeed.
you were clearly manifestly out of breath at the end of it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's very much a workout, and I guess partly because of the length of the thing. If I just take it here, so we play through the reed. Here's the reed like this, which is very small, and you can actually make a noise just with that on its own, like that. So we've got two bits of wood here, so it's called a double reed. And then the air that we blow in goes through there, goes down here, all the way down here. Then there's, I can take that off, you can see basically a U-bend. So the air goes through there, and then all the way out here, and then escapes through any holes that are open. But the lowest note is when all the holes are shut, so the air only comes out through the top. So the air has quite a long way to go, and actually the bassoon, it's like driving a car, a sort of petrol car. You can't drive it without putting some stuff in. And the bassoon is exactly the same. Our fuel is our air. And if you don't have enough air, then the sound will just be a bit dead. Sometimes when I'm practicing, I will sort of be really clear about my breathing structure. Part of playing a wind instrument in general is about working out where the breath is and making the breath a musical part of your playing as well. And very rarely will you have something where there is no place to breathe. But in the C.P. Bach I was playing, that's an unaccompanied sonata, so therefore you don't have any long breaks for a piano or anyone else, so really you're in charge. But that does also mean that you can take a bit more time at certain moments if you need to breathe or if you need to sort of get together, if the music sort of makes sense.
Is this your only bassoon?
It is my only one. They're quite expensive.
How much are they? How much is a good one?
A good one.
I assume this is a good one.
It is quite a good one, yeah. North of £20,000 to get a new one. And actually, quite a few people do get new instruments because you're dealing with water vapour. They have a shelf life of about 100 years. So old, very old bassoons from the 16th century exist, but you can't really play them. So
not like a Stradivarius where...
No. It sort of gets better. No, for us, the wood begins to rot and all sorts of not very nice things. There are people out there and organisations who support, especially younger musicians who are training and stuff like that. But I think probably the biggest problem with the bassoon in general is actually the price at the lower level. So even a full size, which this is, sort of student model, is new, is about £5,000. And you can't really get much below 3,000 really. And for most people, of course, that's completely untenable. So that's partly why the instrument is quite rare, because most people can't afford to make that sort of investment, or at least make an investment on at the beginning, perhaps not quite.
Yes, because you've got to learn how to play it well.
Exactly.
What's the leading instrument that you play to know that you want to do the bassoon? Well, what made you want to play the bassoon?
Well, I didn't play any other wind instrument before. I was a singer, so when the story was when I was a chorister at St John's in Cambridge, we were singing a Bach cantata, I think, and right in front of me this funny instrument sat down and it started playing, and I just fell in love with the sound, absolutely fell in love with it, and I said, that's what I want to play. But at that stage, I was singing regularly with the choir, but also playing the violin and the viola and the piano. And so parents and teachers were a bit sort of unsure about whether I should take up yet another instrument. But I sort of pursued and kept on at them. And then in the end, they said, okay, yeah, you can start. And the rest is history. For my training, I suppose the singing has really, really helped. And knowing what it means to have a supportive breath, a breathing line, all these sorts of different things. Because unlike, say, the bagpipes, where you can start on a chandler, which is a sort of recorder-type instrument, with the bassoon you don't necessarily have to have started on another wind instrument. You can just sort of give it a go. And I've got students who started even as young as 6 years old, because you can get mini ones. They are about this big.
Okay.
And they are very much sort of grandchildren of this size. And you can get other ones in sort of different sizes before you get up to the full size. So they are designed, of course, to allow younger people to play. Some people might start on the oboe or the clarinet and move to the bassoon, but that's not something you have to do. You can just start straight on it.
So can you give us a tour of the instrument?
Indeed.
Yeah.
So,
has every piece got a name? You don't have to remember them
more or less, actually. Yeah. Most of the pieces relate to the notes that they play. But if we start, this, as I said, was our reed, our double reed. Mm-hmm. Then this metal thing here is called the crook, and it comes off on its own. And what it does, as I said, is it connects the main body of the bassoon with the reed. And these two things are probably, I mean, I know I just talked about how much the actual instrument costs, but actually almost the reed, and then to a certain extent as well the crook, have a huge effect on the sound and the quality of the instrument itself. So we've got all of this, but actually this tiny thing is almost the most important thing.
Oh, so but what sort of life does that have?
It depends, and on how much you play. But I've had these. I mean, I normally buy them in batches of 10.
Yeah.
And I think the last batch I got was about 4 months ago, something like that. So
okay.
they last 4 or 5 months.
How much does a good reed cost?
The reed itself is.
Sorry for this.
No, it is.
But it's the question that it's always on the antiques roadshow. You just want an idea.
I think the reed itself is about £15 each.
Okay.
Quite a few people make their own. I don't, but quite a few make their own because it's cheaper, and also you can tailor make them to your playing. But actually, I'm lucky because I found a maker who makes reeds exactly how I like them. So for me, that works. And making them is a very long process. I don't really know how to do it, partly because I'm not terribly interested. Some people love it, which is great, but it's not really my sort of thing, and it takes a long time and all that sort of thing. So I prefer to perhaps spend a bit more money on buying the reed, but then that will give me a bit more time to be doing other things.
But I've just seen, I mean, when you look at it in detail, this wooden part, I suppose, is where the interesting sound is coming from.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise it doubles up, so it's going. I mean, it's going down here
all the way down
here,
and then turning round. Yeah.
And so all of that is contributing towards the sound.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got hollow tubes inside of here. Yeah. And actually, a development of the instrument during the 19th century was they basically widened the size of the bassoon and the bore of the wood, so that it could then make a bigger sound. Because a Baroque instrument is very thin, the wood is quite thin, and the tube is quite narrow as well. So it therefore can't resonate as much. Whereas with this, it's a bit wider, it can do a bit more. And actually my instrument itself has got particular, I think they describe it as having reinforced bores. So the sides of the tubes are I think extra thick, just to give it an even bigger, richer sound.
But I'm trying to work out, is it laminated or is it
varnished? I think, yeah.
But I'm just seeing the grain of the
wood.
The wood.
I think I'm not entirely sure. I like to think mine looks a bit like a tiger with its tiger stripes.
Yes.
And I'm not sure. They may have actually painted those on. Whether that's the natural grain of the wood, I'm not entirely sure. But most bassoons are made from maple wood.
Okay.
I think just because it's strong but also flexible at the same time. And then you've got the silver keys. I think most of them are solid silver, or at least silver plated, so that they don't tarnish. And here they are. And and different instruments have a slightly different number of keys. So generally, the higher up you go, the more keys you will have.
Okay.
Because they basically add tricks or make things easier, especially if you're having to jump around quite a lot.
In the orchestration that you have, is there like a mapping between what's happening here and the keys, or is there always a way to play the note?
Most of the time, normally, it's pretty standard.
You don't need the special key.
No. But actually, sometimes, if you're doing sort of more modern stuff, and they'll ask for something that you've sort of never seen before, probably what they've done, the composer's either a player themselves or they've gone and asked a bassoonist. And so you will see on the music itself, they say, this is the fingering that you will do for this thing. So perhaps if it's a slightly odd trill or a very high note or something like that, that is not part of the standard repertoire, then they will actually put it on. But most of the time, it's pretty standard. You've got the sort of the fingerings for every note, of course, but for quite a few notes, there are different fingerings you can use. So for a D, for example, a tenor D, that's the one I use the most, and that's quite nice and rich and loud and everything. But there are sort of two others, and you can do other stuff as well, fingerings that I use quite a lot as well to change the colour. So this is the first one. And then
So those first two, it felt more like you were doing that with your mouth, and breath. But the last one was definitely, and I'm interested in how that'll be picked up on the camera. That was definitely a very different sound coming from the instrument. Yeah.
Because what you're doing, the first two, I was doing that, and the first one I added on an extra key there, so it actually slightly changes the effect. But the last one I put on 3 fingers down here, so it sort of has the effect of covering the sound. And that's brilliant, depending on what you're doing. If you're doing something which needs a nice big rich bassoon solo, then you'll do the first one. But if you're trying to blend in with something or be really, really quiet, then maybe you'll do the last one. So sort of using the different fingerings to your advantage could be quite good.
What's this, dare I say, slightly sexy bulge at the top called?
Up here,
Well,
all of this.
This one here, yeah.
Well, the whole, this is the last piece. It's called the bell.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably partly why it's called that, is because of this, the bulge here, like that. But it's just the top bit of the bassoon. This is actually the lowest note on the instrument. So the reason it's this long is so that you can, when you put down all the notes like that, then the last hole is covered like that. So that's why you need just this extra extension.
I see.
I can do an effect with you where if you put your hand on there, so cover it down, and then just feel the resistance.
So suddenly there was a massive breath of air.
Exactly.
Yeah, because there was nothing. Yeah, there was nowhere else for it to escape.
Indeed, putting it down.
It's not the piano
it's
key.
It's not the piano. No. And actually, that's something I find frustrating. Lots of students find frustrating, that it can take a little while to learn the fingering and get used to them and everything. Because as I said, the piano, everyone can play the piano. You just sit down and you do whatever.
Objection.
More or less, everyone can play the piano. Whereas this, you need the understanding, the sort of combinations of the fingerings. And actually, they say the bassoon is one of the hardest instruments, which I do stand by. And one of them is because quite quickly, the combination of fingers required to make a note get very complicated, especially the higher up you go. It becomes quite random and quite awkward as well. So if you're doing quite a lot up high quite fast, then it can be really, really tricky, because you have to move lots of different things all at the same time.
Does the music look the same?
It looks the same, but so we mainly play in the bass clef, which we see here, but because the bassoon can go quite high or relatively high within the bass sort of sound, we also use this clef here.
Oh, okay.
Which is different and quite rare. This is called the tenor clef, and the cello uses it quite a lot, similar to the bassoon, and the tenor trombone uses it as well, and that's about it now. Back in the...
You sometimes see some voice stuff.
Occasionally, yeah. Sort of back in the Middle Ages and stuff like that, they would use the tenor clef, and tenors would sing in the tenor clef, altos would sing in the alto clef. There's even a soprano clef, which looks similar, which is very rare. But nowadays, with the tenor clef, we are some of the few people who still actually use
Cling
it.
to it. I don't know whether instruments have the same limitations as the human voice.
Definitely wider.
Is it? It's
definitely
wider. Yeah, okay.
And actually, the bassoon, I think, of all the wind instruments, the flute maybe not because it can go so high, but the bassoon has got one of the biggest ranges. So I'll show you. So this is the lowest note, which is a B flat, sort of an octave up from the lowest note on the piano. So it is lower than the cello. It can sound a bit rude as well.
Well, yeah, well.
Which is used for good effect sometimes. But then we can go all the way up to a top E, which is 3.5 octaves higher. And this sometimes can squeak. There we go.
Wow.
So from that down to very, very different. And that's part of its fun, that you really are, a lot of the time, jumping around. And the characteristic right down at the bottom is quite different from the top. No two consecutive notes are the same. So unlike the piano, where effectively the notes are more or less the same, they've got the same resistance, the same tone color on a decent piano. So then it's completely up to the player. With the bassoon, even before anyone's tried to play it, the relationship between the two, the natural tone color, the dynamic that they will make, the resistance that they will have, each note on the instrument is slightly different. So it's therefore the job of the player, particularly if you're doing something really smooth and legato, to bring that together and really homogenize the sound. When you're playing low notes, your sound wants to be, your embouchure, which is our posh word for mouth shape, basically, wants to be very relaxed and quite open, not tense at all. And so therefore I think of the sound more, because then what it does with your mouth is it drops, it's sort of more. Whereas if you're playing high, you want it to be a bit more supported, a bit tighter, I suppose. And so therefore I think of the sound me. So the difference between me and more will make a big difference when you're playing the notes. So if I just show you.
Yeah.
So more. And as a result, my chin really went very low like that in order to create the space. But then if I go high.
Can you keep the same note and change the shape of your mouth to see whether that
And see
makes
what happens.
Yeah, let's see.
I'll try it with the high one. So.
Quite different.
Yeah.
Okay, that's an effect, isn't
that's
it?
That's an effect. Yeah. And that can be quite useful sometimes, that you can bend the pitch so much, I think.
And I'm just seeing for the first time, because my eyes are looking at last, that in the support, it's actually on a brace.
Here. Yes.
And so you don't. When you're playing it, do you take it off the brace or?
When I am playing it, then I put it on.
Okay.
And you can see what it's like that. It's a harness.
Yes.
And it straps all around my body, so therefore the body takes the weight. Because if you just try holding it like that.
Okay. Oh, that
is quite
that
heavy.
That weighs a bit. Yeah.
So if you have to hold it like that with no support, then very quickly your arm could get tired, and then you could get tension and all that sort of thing. So the role of the harness is just to take the weight.
You clearly were getting some emotional force from the fact you were standing up. And normally, I guess, within the context of an orchestra, you'll be sitting down and not moving that much.
Yeah. I love to move around, and I have had in the past people saying perhaps don't move quite so much. And similar, moving off feet particularly, or moving, because what you're doing here is you're actually slightly changing the support structure that you've got here. So I think something that someone has said to me in the past, which I think is really good, and I try and remember, is if you can move your knees, that's not too bad. But the moment you move your feet, then you're slightly changing your balance and your grounding, and then that's where things could begin to sort of go slightly haywire. But I do move quite a lot. I think that's just sort of how the music takes me. And particularly when I'm standing up, one of the reasons I like standing up is because you can feel a lot freer. Because when you're sitting down, of course, there's only sort of so much you can do within the confines of a chair. Having said that, if I'm in a rehearsal for 3 hours, then I like to sit down.
Yes. Anything else you'd like to tell me?
The bassoon's a great instrument.